Welcome to Think Out, the monthly debate series of the Institute of Science and Technology for Humanity at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. At the Institute of Science and Technology for Humanity, we address societal challenges through transdisciplinary team research. We combine the latest in science and engineering with deep domain knowledge from social sciences, humanities, business, and the arts. In each Think Out, we bring together leading researchers and industry experts from very different disciplinary backgrounds to discuss and debate an important question the world is facing. In the Think Out, we aim to dive deep into a complex issue, have fun, and engage you, the audience, in this open discussion between leading thinkers. So today we address the question on how the pandemic must bring about changes in the design of physical spaces in which we work, live, learn, and play. My name is Vanessa Evers, and together with my colleague Helen Stevens, we will moderate this debate. So over to you, Helen, to introduce our experts.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Very much looking forward to this discussion today. Just want to start by mentioning that we do want to have this driven by the audience as usual. So please feel free to put your questions and comments in the Q&A. You won't be able to use the chat, so do put it in the Q&A function, and we will endeavor to respond to those and to get our panelists to respond to those as we go along. As you know, if you tune into these sessions often, we also start with a poll question, and we're going to do the same thing today. Just before I do my introduction, so Maitri, perhaps we could even put that poll question up right away. The poll for today asks you whether you have two options, whether you'd rather work in an office with isolated cubicles and only virtual meetings to protect yourself from COVID, or you would rather work as before in an office with open space and physical meetings. So that's kind of going to set the tone of what we're going to talk about today. But let me introduce our panelists first, and then I will give them an opportunity each to kind of introduce their positions in this discussion. So first, Assistant Professor Felicity Chan, who teaches courses on urban planning and design in the Public Policy and Global Affairs program at NTU. She teaches also as part of the minor in geography and urban planning as well, and especially emphasizes in her teaching making connections between theory and practice. She has a deep and keen interest in the organization of space via human activities and its influence on the formation of social relations, particularly in the context of the urban environment. Her current research looks into building socially beneficial and vibrant social enterprises in Singapore and the region. She is working on Urban Imprints of the Network Society. I think that's a book title, which focuses on the development of foreign system schools and their effects on the configurations of urban space and social relations in Singapore. Second today, I'm very pleased also to welcome Georgios Christopoulos, who's associate professor in the College of Business here, the Nanyang Business School. He's the director also of the Culture Science Institute, as well as a member of the Advisory Council of the Academy of Neuroscience for Architecture and a collaborator of the University of Pennsylvania Center for Neuroscience. His research aims to uncover, explain, predict, and improve human decision-making in dynamic and complex environments, and his lab uses advanced neurobehavioral methods to examine questions of human learning and decision-making with a focus on cognitive flexibility and computerized training of working adults. He focuses on environmental and urban neuroscience, and especially relevant to today, the effect of indoor and outdoor spaces and their architectural characteristics on human performance, health, and happiness. So very relevant to our current situation with COVID. So without further ado, and with those introductions, let me hand over to Felicity first, to introduce her kind of point of view in the discussion here. And you can also see the results of the poll question right there on your screens now. Thanks, Felicity.
Thank you, Harlem. Thank you, Vanessa. So today I'll give my position more about urban planning, about the design of cities. Well, so the COVID-19, I think, really has been, I would describe it as a metaphor of a floodlight, right? That has really brought some form of clarity to the fault lines of society. But it has also created a lot of confusing signals. So much that when we look at the trends, we don't really know what to expect next. And therefore, we're having this discussion, right? So things about like questions is, like what is temporary, what is a flash in the pan trend, what is here to stay, and really the question is how long would it take for us to form a habit of just not wanting to do certain things anymore because we've lost the appetite, we've changed our diet. So when you do look at all these reports around the world, the United Nations, the Habitat, all the different publications, you do see a list of like possible causes of what affect infection and mortality rates. And there's just so many. And as a result of that multiplicity of reasons, it's quite hard to tell what is the main cause, right? And which are more interactive effects. So for example, you've seen a lot like connectivity in the metro areas when there's a lot of movement and connections between people. And that's what cities are known to be good for. International hubs like Singapore, people flying in and out. I mean, those are places where you would expect high rates of transmission. And then there's the sacred cow called the density, right? It's all about let's pack it in. This is our compact city. We need to be climate ready. And then the next thing we know, like, hey, places that are too dense might not be a good idea. But of course, I mean, the opposing views is that it's not density. Density is not a bad thing on its own, but it's overcrowding. And then we go on to the next things like, no, I mean, the rich people seems to be fine. The wealthy cities, Manhattan seems to do fine, but not the Bronx. And so socioeconomic status, like, you have equitable distribution of space, and all that, reasons, whether you are in the kind of work that exposes you to that's transmission, I mean, to infection, whether you have to work with your hands, with people in places where there are a lot of people, or you're at home at your computer by yourself in your room, so on and so forth. And there's also reasons of governance and also simply your social behavior, whether you like to socialize, you're keeping rules, or you just keep to yourself. So what I think what we are here at this point is really a soul searching or a paradigm searching phase. And I have to say that I have no clear answers myself, but this is, I'll share some of the things that I'm thinking about. So I think what this all throws into question is our values towards human development and our models for urban development. So questions is how cities perhaps should be redesigned. So I think in the urban planning playbook, we've seen a lot of things that are now, being so-called renewed and reinforced calls. One of them is equitable access to basic infrastructure and amenities, that we should have equitable space, living space, and food and clean water and hospital, electronic communications. We should focus on the locale, the neighborhood, right? Instead of trying to do things that are more regional or bigger. And we should do urban farming. I mean, these are very familiar things in urban planning that has been in for the last 10, 20 years, right? And it's just now become even more acute that we should do this. But there are other things in the playbook that needs to be debated and refined. One of them is densification. Do we always do it? How do we do it? Should we always have integrated hubs where everything is together, one-stop shop? Or maybe we shouldn't do that, right? And then this whole idea of public transportation, right? It's good to have public transportation. But now, we know that in Singapore, there was quite a bit of the infections among bus drivers at bus interchange. So it brings into question, like, really, should we share or should we not share? It's a tension, right? We want to have equitable access to amenities, but yet, we are saying that maybe we shouldn't share transportation. You know, we should go back to the car or back to the bike. So, so what are shareable amenities and what are not? So I think there are two other tensions as well. The other thing is working from home. So working from home, we realized that we couldn't live in pigeon holes. We need bigger space. We have children at home. I mean, everybody needs to go on the Zoom. You can't really have 2 Zoom calls happening in one room. And so we are looking for bigger apartments and local amenities, right? We can go get food nearby. We can go to the park. We don't need to travel. We don't need to take a bus to go to a park. But then for cities with land scarcity, like Singapore, what this means that if you want something bigger, you need to be denser. But at the same time, we need spatial distancing. So what are we back to? Are we back to this reloading of Garden Cities 2.0, which is an idea from the late 1800s, where we have green belt and plenty of access to outdoor space? Question mark, right? The other tension, I think, is that in our search to get out of this COVID situation, everyone, I wouldn't say everyone, but so many of us are looking for universal solutions, right? One size fits all, so we can all jump on the same bandwagon and get out of here. But the reality is that, if anything, this tells us, you know, this pandemic has taught us that we need to be flexible and adaptable in order to be resilient. So is universal solution the way forward? Okay, so these are several things, but I have a few design considerations based on the trends and Singapore-like environments that I like to offer for consideration and discussion. I'm going to be careful here that I'm not assuming some form of universality. Okay, number one, that since home and work life has collapsed into one space, our first and second places have collapsed into one, many of us actually you know, feel that loneliness, that we don't see our colleagues anymore. We don't have connections. I mean, like, yes, colleagues, some are nice, some are not nice. You're happy that you can just skip the ones that are not nice, but you miss the ones that are nice, right? That they are there to encourage you and to have this like kind of, you know, shared circumstances. You're in the same workplace, you want to talk to them. So you see an increase in co-living and co-working spaces, right? And also the fact that we are working and living at home, there's this desire for separation. Whether there's too many of us, you know, like if everybody is a full working adult at home, you might not have the space in your apartment to do that, or in your house. So I think we could possibly think of downtown office blocks turning into co-live workspaces, meaning that, you know, the whole idea of the loft idea where you work and you live at the same place, but with all these empty office leases, perhaps this might be something to think about. This is one possible, you know, city design intervention to change some of these to apartments, right? Where you can actually work in there as well, the spaces to work. And this retrofitting should not be, you know, at too great a cost, I would imagine, but I'm not an architect, not an engineer, so I will let those among our audience weigh in on that. The second aspect of this whole collapse of work and home space is that I think if you heard of this concept called the third places, right? The third place is the place which is not the home or the workplace, but a place where you socialize. So I think there is this need to have more third places and so-called parochial spaces where you feel safe, there's familiarity to socialize, and we can look at like community gardens, right? You know, a lot of places are already doing that, which is outdoors too, which is great, or pop-up cafes, or, you know, cafes in the void decks, right? In Singapore, our public housing have a lot of void decks. Could we rethink on how to use some of these instead of everybody going into the town center? Second, I think that there is, we are at the point of anti-lockdown claustrophobia. So I think we need anti-lockdown claustrophobia, anti-claustrophobia spaces. I think this is talking about the soul and the spirit, that at some point when you can't move around enough, you actually feel really trapped. So, you know, we talk about outdoor spaces on the ground, you know, even sometimes the patio helps, a balcony. we talk about forests, we talk about more play spaces, right? You know, now that our home and work is collapsed into one, we need a place to have an adventure. This really emerged from a discussion I had with my 4th year students in the class I teach called What is a City yesterday. And we talk about disorder and order, right? How is disorder and order designed? And one of them said that Singapore is just too orderly. And I said, why? Well, because you can't get lost. There's no sense of adventure. So I think this whole, I mean, in a small island state, sometimes you feel really trapped. We need to think a lot more about how do we create places where people at least have that metaphysical ability to escape, right? Not escape rooms per se, but you know, in the place like in the forest, you can feel like you're more not overwhelmed, but you're just awed by something bigger than your 4 rooms, right? I mean, than your 4 walls in the room. Okay, the third thing I thought of is this idea of ventilated air. You know, we talk about it's good to have good flowing air, and so many buildings are trying to redo their circulation system. This brings to mind that perhaps, you know, in our new buildings and the way we think about our malls and libraries is to think about how do we combine the outdoor-indoor spaces. And I thought about how our tropical architecture has been able to do that quite well before all these glass, steel, and concrete came about. You know, we have long eaves, we have like patio spaces where the indoor and outdoor has an interim space, as well as, you know, having spent a lot of time in California, one of my favorite spaces has been the Santa Monica Library. So if you go look up, you see images of it. The indoor and the outdoor just floats in and out. And I know that if we want AC, it's not climate responsible to open the door, but there's probably some way of doing this, right? Better than what we're doing now, which is to AC the entire building, and outside it's like really hot. I'm talking about Singapore in this case and tropical places. And I think with that, this whole ventilated air is now, you know, precious clean air, is this idea of design of cities is to focus on the multi-foci centers. Really this idea of dispersal rather than full concentration. So, you know, should we be doing an integrated mall where everything is in the mall? Or should there be some refinement of what mixed use is? Should all eating places be planned in one area, or should they be divided across the different levels so that at different times, different places are being, you know, at the same time, different places are being used, right? People are spreading out and not everyone's going to food court at 12 o'clock. So I think there is a need for thinking about, do you put all the same use on one floor, or do we separate it a little bit? And last but not least, I think if anything, this COVID-19 has taught us that there's a need to be self-sufficient. And I'm not talking about not looking out for others or not being accountable to others, but in terms of city planning, right? What does that mean? Meaning that I talk about how public transportation, there's this fear of sharing things, that common surfaces, air. There's more trend, I mean, there's a trend towards walking and biking. This idea of an independent, sufficient space between people. I think I'd like to end with this, that self-sufficiency really reminds me, having spent many years in California, that you need to be earthquake ready. So an earthquake kit ready kind of mentality for each town. So in the earthquake kit, what you have torch, you have dry food, water, first aid, medicine, clean clothes, a set of clean clothes, pocket knives, sanitation, toilet rolls, and so on and so forth. So when you think about a city, what does that mean? I mean, when you think about a town, a neighborhood, so you should have at least some form of like local generation of energy. You should have some food source, urban farms, healthcare, and, you know, water supply. Yeah, and so an open space, last but not least, I think in a dense city, in a city where there's land scarcity, I mean, there is a temptation to build on every plot. But I think it has shown that open spaces allows you the flexibility to convert to, you know, whether some last minute shelters or so on and so forth, a place where people could have some room to breathe. So I'll end here. Sorry, I think I took more than 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Felicity. And now I also invite Georgios to give us his introduction. Thanks.
Thank you. Because I'm not so eloquent as Felicity, I have some slides to share. If I manage to find. Why? Can you see my? Oh, very strange. Okay.
Maybe you want to.
Can you?
Yeah, that's coming. Yeah.
Great. Okay. I'm not an architect, just to clarify. I'm a neuroscientist, so I'm more interested in how humans perceive the environment. And I will mostly follow what Felicity said. I will focus on the design of office space, which is what my research is so far. But generally speaking, space has been evolving. So we need to understand this. Space is always changing. And the key reason that space will be changing is because there is usually a major event. And usually it's a technological event. All right. So this is the office in the 1900s. You see they need a lot of space for the paper. Then if we go to the 60s, okay, not much has changed, but we have the introduction of typewriters. And then go to the early 80s where the computers appeared, and we have these computers. So if you complain about the size of your screen, please compare what happened in the 80s. So generally, we need to understand, though, that the space evolves with us, and we also change the space. So I use this picture of the mockingbird. You see the shape of the flower and the shape of the bird, actually, all right, has been co-evolving to match each other. So that's what happens between us and the cities. So it's not only that the city will change us, but also we will change the city. All right, and quite interestingly, when I saw this picture in Singapore, people will say, "Well, no, Singaporeans will never do that." So challenge accepted. And no, you underestimate Singaporeans. This is a picture I took some time ago. Even in Singapore, you can see that people will change the landscape and the city. So it's a dynamic relationship, and we need to understand this. So this shape can be changed to something like that. Okay. So behavior will change the space, which change the behavior, will change the space, and so on. So if we understand this, we can understand what happened now in COVID and what is going to happen after COVID. So this is just before COVID. The introduction of a flat screen actually changed the space of the office space. Then COVID came, and initially we were very optimistic. We had this standing office, and we will all be very well dressed. But then reality kicked in after probably 1 week, and this is what happened. Right. So this is again an example of how the humans will change the space. So interestingly, now COVID changed the way organizations think. So we are more accepting to have babies sitting with us, or even dogs, during a meeting, whereas before this was not accepted. So I think the COVID is a great opportunity to resolve at least 2 long-standing issues. The first one is, what is the office for? And when we built office before, we built it to do everything in there. Eating, even sometimes sleeping at office. The first message we get is that both employees and employers realize that they can work from home. It's possible, because before the major argument was that, no, we cannot do that. And that means also the end of the open space office, which is not a bad thing. Even before COVID, the open space received many complaints. If you can even say that it was dead. A major complaint was no privacy, and you could not concentrate. Actually, we did a study that we did a very simple manipulation, somebody working in a cubicle versus no cubicle. And we found that the moment we put you in a cubicle, you will persevere more to solve a problem, all right? So cubicles are not bad, and not everything needs to be social. So there are two solutions to the post-COVID office. One is the plexiglass office, as it's called, all right? So we basically have the same open space, but we use a lot of plexiglass to protect the spread, and maybe other ways like special material. And the other solution is we use the office only for tasks that are social and creative. Basically, is what Felicity said, describes as a third space, all right? So office is no more about tasks that you can do by yourself. There's no reason to come to office if you want to script or if you want to write something, okay? So what is the office for post-COVID? Depends on what we want to do it. One, if we want to do something social, creative, yes, we can go to the office. But if there's something we can do by ourselves, actually it's better to either work from home or go to office, but work in a cubicle. So this could be help us think how to design the office, the post-COVID office. The second opportunity, and I'm gonna finish with that, is finally, we need to talk about healthy offices. Offices, even before COVID, they made us sick, okay? And not only mentally and psychologically sick, but also physiologically, and like we get sick because you go to the office. So what people talk about now is to install sensors of air quality or viral load. And this will help a lot in solving the COVID-19 situation. At least we can monitor when the viral load increases in the office, so we can do something. But this is an opportunity because air quality is quite important. So we have, and not only air quality, anything that has to do with the environmental quality at the office. And we have two studies, and you'll be surprised to show that to know that actually, if you increase air quality, the thermal comfort, the noise level, meaning it's better noise level, and the light quality, you decrease stress at work, which is a totally psychological phenomenon. Okay. And similarly, and not very surprisingly, if you increase, you have better air quality and better thermal comfort, you reduce what is called the sick building syndrome. Basically, how many days you are off from work exactly because you go at work. Okay. So basically, you reduce absenteeism. So the fact that now we are thinking, because of COVID, we are now thinking how to change the office is a great opportunity to change, not only to reduce the COVID-19 transmission, but generally to improve the office space. So we need to improve thermal comfort, the light, noise, etc. So, okay, with that, I'll finish. So to summarize, we need to rethink what the office is about. And secondly, it's a great opportunity to redesign an office, even if the COVID-19, let's say tomorrow we find a solution, there is no COVID-19, again, we should try to improve office space. And thank you. Yeah.
Thanks to you both. And yeah, let me encourage everyone in the audience once again to just post Q&A in the Q&A system there. We're happy to have comments or questions that we will try to follow up on with our panelists. Maybe I can just begin by asking a question about perhaps something that Georgios just ended with, and this is the question of kind of persistence. This is something that I think Felicity referred to too. I mean, yeah, this seems to be an opportunity, but you know, I mean, if the pandemic kind of goes away in the next 6 months, I'm just wondering whether you think this is something that will stick around. Are these kinds of changes, these kinds of discussions that we're having likely to be ongoing and permanent? And if not, perhaps how do we kind of take this opportunity to make some of the good changes that both of you are perhaps suggesting here? Maybe I don't know. Yeah, maybe Felicity can go first. All right.
Well, so I guess the question is, sorry, that if COVID goes away, how could we maintain the momentum to make these changes?
Yeah, I guess I'm interested in whether you think some of it, I guess, first of all, will it go away? That's one question, which I think you posed yourself. But then also, yeah, if you think it will go away, then how do we make it perhaps some of the good things more persistent?
Yeah. Oh, George.
Yeah, I can maybe
go for it.
Yeah, I think, and from my interactions with the industry, people have realized that even if this goes away, something else will be coming in within the next 10 years. So we need to be prepared anyway. And I think the key highlight here is that the key solution actually is the modularity of the office space. So I think architects now, they try to find solutions that are modular, meaning that you can change the space. That's the first thing. The second thing is there should be the office space should be easy to accept new technology, especially sensors. So sensors of human activities, sensors of the space, and sensors on humans, such as Fitbit or something more evolved, could help us address the current and the future situation. So I think that probably, yes, if COVID-19, let's say, is not anymore, of course, the intensity of the discussion will not be as it is now, but people realize that they need to prepare for the future.
I guess I'll just add on to say that I think many of the things that we're talking about now have just been accentuated by COVID-19. I mean, sick offices, this whole idea of like not wanting to go to work every day, turning up in office. I mean, it's something we've all been feeling for a little while, to have a bit of breathing room, right? And, I think just living in a dense city makes us feel sometimes we're in a concrete jungle. So I just think that this pandemic has just literally brought many of these acute needs into the forefront. I don't think it's going to go away. In fact, I think it's here to stay. Yeah, but I guess with it becoming so-called less pandemic-like and more endemic, would we just be less how do I say? I mean, would we feel like would we feel the acute need less, and therefore just not try to pursue them? But I think if anything, I think it is something glaring in the way we build our cities. So I think it's here to stay. I would say that here.
Interesting. I guess, Helen, we can all chime into this discussion now, including everybody of our participants. Feel free to drop us your opinion in the Q&A as well as your questions. If you have an opinion or you don't agree with something, please also stick it in there. We're happy to follow up. So we'll free fall this discussion now with all of us and all of you. Yeah, it's super interesting. As you guys are talking, I'm thinking that, it wasn't great for everybody. It was awful for everybody, but I mean, it was awful for everybody in a different way. It's just difficult to know what people need. Some really wanted to get out of the house. Some really don't want to go to the office. Some were scared for their health. Some were annoyed that others were scared for their health. And, it's almost everybody had their own unique smorgasbord of issues when it came to working or living with COVID. And I'm kind of thinking that if you say if I would have a big company and I would redesign my whole office space, then still I'd be very dependent, for instance, on people being vaccinated or not. And that would be really different in different countries, in different, even different regions of the same country, as we can see in the US. So, there, do we involve policies? I mean, do we introduce policies that say, I know you can come to the office, we made it all beautiful and great for working together and being creative, but you have to be vaccinated. And then I'm thinking, could you maybe use the design as an excuse to kind of say, well, we made it all like this, so you guys can all work there really safely, but it will only work if you're vaccinated. We can't help it. You're going to have to, that's going to be the prerequisites. What are you guys' thoughts on that? An interplay between behavior, people's unique situation, the design of the office space, and the policies that you might want to exact or not?
Well, yeah, I guess one of this thing that I feel quite strongly about is also that this whole vaccination versus unvaccination is indeed in some ways making our cities, making our office spaces less inclusive, right? On one hand, the science says that maybe your viral load is lower, but it also shows that it does not stop you from getting infected or transmitting it in some ways. And I think that, I know this will sound very idealistic, but I think as a society, I'm talking about Singapore, since we are here, that this accountability to each other needs to increase. I think when we start to concern that we're wearing a mask, not just for ourselves, but really for others, and we are not going to certain places we don't feel unwell for others, instead of always having that government telling you what to do and what not to do and finding ways around it. I think this is, hopefully this pandemic can increase that consciousness for mutual accountability. But I know, of course, this is a long way to go for any society, but hopefully this brings us a little further along.
Yeah. Georgios Hallam, please join our discussion. Georgios, you're so far away. There you are.
Yes, okay. Yeah, I'm still listening though. Yeah. Yes, I agree. Well, I know that some European countries, they have imposed being vaccinated as a prerequisite to go at work. And the employer actually has the right to know and even not pay you if you are not vaccinated. And this is not only in the health industry, it could be in any industry. But I agree with Felicity that at the very end, this will not work, because this is not only vaccination, it's our everyday behavior that will protect us. At the very end, it might be a very big social influence experiment. From our studies, it shows that at least in Singapore, people are willing to sacrifice their own or their family well-being in favor of the, let's say, Singapore's well-being, which is very good for this situation. Now, how this is going to evolve is quite interesting. So I had a look at the replies to our poll. Most people were willing to work from home, but we had two scenarios where the COVID situation continues, or on the opposite, you decide to stay at home, but the COVID situation improves and everyone goes at office. Mm-hmm. So it's quite interesting that people will follow. So it seems that whatever the majority will do, especially for the question of going to office or not. Right?
I mean, peer pressure that all my colleagues are there.
Yes, then I will go. Yeah, then I will go. And if everyone doesn't go to office, actually still there are some people that still want to go to office. So if our little poll is real, we can say that there is people are favoring a hybrid situation, but they want to go to office at least for a while, but maybe some days a week. So this is what we need to be thinking about. And that's why I said that maybe when we go to office, we only go for the social part. We go for the meetings, etc. And we stay at home when we need to concentrate and do our work.
Yeah, so I have a question that maybe also ties into these kind of bigger questions of kind of this, maybe the social structure, even the political structure within which all this is going on. And so one of the things that I think has happened during the pandemic is that people at least feel like working from home has created more work, right? I mean, I saw one of your cartoons, Giorgio, so the woman there at her desk in the middle of the night, right? And somebody's asking her to, come to bed at 4 a.m. or whatever, right? So, but I think this is, so I guess I'm wondering about, how this plays into this also, what part work plays in our life. I mean, Felicity, you mentioned this kind of work, live, play, which has been a motto of Singapore and JTC for like a long time, right? I mean, this is also Silicon Valley, Facebook and Google have sort of pioneered these kind of work, live, play kind of spaces, right? And one of the critiques of that has been, well, this is just capitalist extraction, right? This is just a way of extracting more labor from people, right? And so I wonder for both of you how you see this aspect, right? Is this a way of just tricking us into working more? Or is it an opportunity for, actually extracting more labor from us, right? Under the guise of sort of pandemic opportunity? Or is there something else kind of going on here as well?
City or me, I don't know.
Yeah, you want to go first? I'm thinking.
Okay. Okay. I don't think that, first of all, I agree that it really has changed the structure of the organization in both a good and bad way. The negative way is exactly what you said. People work more. This is, I think we don't even need to do a study about that. It's very clear. It's very clear. There are also positive aspects. So people are more willing, are more flexible. The organization understands that you have a family, and maybe some formalities are not needed anymore. We don't need to travel so much. They realize, oh, actually, we don't need to go to so many conferences, but to do them. All right. So they're both good and bad. I don't think the companies intentionally do that. But it just happened. And
even if they would say that they would do it intentionally, so they've made me work a lot more, but at the same time, I feel like I'm having more quality time with my family. So then it's all right, right? As long as my perception is positive and I'm happy with having the extra work done, and I'm happy with the balance in my life, then it could be like a perfect ploy.
Yeah, that's great. There's something we use in psychology. It's called perceived control. It's not how much real control you have of your life, but how much you think you control your life. And I think in that situation, we think we have more control of our life, right? So I choose what I am gonna wear when I meet you, etc. I think if the companies want to do that on purpose, they're taking a very large risk, because we don't know if this is going to hold forever. So now in US, we have the Great Resignation. People are resigning, and companies cannot find people to hire. And this is another outcome of this situation. So it will be a big gamble if companies want to do that opportunistically. And so this is something that we really need to consider. I heard that Google wants everyone to go back at office by the end of the year.
They're paying people differentially, right? That's the latest.
They are. So I think they realize that. I think they're still trying to figure out what they want to do.
I sit in the Bahamas, but work in San Francisco every single day. Oh, I guess Menlo.
Yeah.
What about this urban planning? Could you design the space, maybe not to trick people, but to motivate them to behave in a way that is beneficial to them, but also beneficial to the city, beneficial to the company?
Beneficial to the company. Well, I mean, this is really using quite environmental deterministic design, which usually never
never ends well.
Yeah, never ends well. They're taking a big risk going that way, and in fact, in some ways, we've always built like that, to built in such a way as what Giorgio showed, that the space influences the behavior, and the behavior also shapes the city, right? But I'm just thinking actually about how this news, this whole ranking thing about how Singapore is the most fatigued country. People spend a lot of time at work and they check their phone all the time. I think there's a study to show that I think we touch our phone like 80 times, right? During the workday, like turn it on, check a few things about it. And so I think it's a larger phenomena that we cannot detach ourselves from digital devices. How do we create cities that will lure people outside, away from the digital devices? I think it's a question that we've not thought about because so much energy and resources have gone into making cities smart. So it's a good question, Vanessa, whether
side of smart, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, this relates to your sort of ideas about third space as well, the kind of idea that we need to create, outdoor spaces, gardens, right, whatever, that are away from, that perhaps you're less likely to look at your phone in such a space, right?
But that could work in really big countries where you all have a Dutch eye in the country, but Singapore is very limited in its space. So you could say, well, I'll do some gardening in the weekend and catch up on my email while I'm there, and then go to work on Tuesday and Wednesday. But that's in Singapore is very limited use of that space. How do you guys see that?
Yeah, I mean, there's all these discussion about trying. I mean, I think giving people balcony or patio spaces work well, especially if you can't get out of your house. But of course, we're not talking about just giving balcony and patio spaces just so that it looks nice, but now really there's a practical use. I think this is one area. I think we talk about community gardens, some form of that. I mean, I think that we don't make use of our vacant sites very well in Singapore. I mean, I think there's always this thinking about we're going to develop it for something, right? Permanent. But in the meantime, it sits kind of empty. And for that reason too, because there's a land scarcity, you don't want people to invest too much, and then you can't take it away. So that question about how do you then bring in that culture of change, in the positive way, and not change always, turning out to be not what I want, but what the government wants. Is there like a middle ground here? So really, I think this is one area to look at. We see tracts of open space around Singapore, and usually they're just turf over. And during the lockdown, they were, there was also like in the news, like all kinds of wildflowers, which is very beautiful because there's no one cutting the grass down. So something to think about.
Yeah, so more pop-up spaces, more flexible spaces. So we're slowly nearing our wrap-up time. Just wondering if all the people that are listening today and all the people that will view this cast in the future, if you could influence them to maybe change their opinion about something, or to make a change in their lives in this relationship, maybe speak to company CEOs directly, what would be an important message that comes from your research that you would want to give them, both Felicity and Georgios? Maybe, who wants to start?
I mean, the important message, I think, is the last one I shared, that we need to talk again about what is a healthy office. And healthy means also, we're talking about physical health, where even physical health we have not achieved. We have to realize we get sick when we go to the office. But also mental health, all right? The office might, when I say the office, I'm talking about the physical structure. I'm not talking about the other human beings, all right? It might make us stressed, tired, unproductive at the very end. And we have to think that the office, even before COVID, the office follow us at home, and the home follow us at office. So how I work at the office, it will affect how I behave to my children, all right, or to my spouse, and how I'm gonna sleep. And how I'm gonna sleep tonight affects my productivity tomorrow. So one way or another, we spend 8 to 10 or 12 hours, I don't know, at the office. I will call the CEOs, etc., the HR. They spend so much money and time to improve productivity, etc. Just do something simple. Offer a better space. And I think it's a very easy, non-intrusive, and long-term investment that will really make them different from other companies.
Okay, so people to feel more comfortable, more happy, more appreciated, inclusive in the space that they live. Okay, that's a great message.
Yeah, and we know that before, we know that even before COVID, the generation Y, Z, and I don't know what's the next one. One of the key criteria of choosing a company to work for, it was not the salary, but it was actually the office and how prestigious the office was, how nice. Right?
For the client, what does it look like for the client?
Yes, it's also a recruitment tool, but also it's a retention tool. You don't want people to leave because the other guy next to you has a better office.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is a really profound question that you asked, Vanessa, because I think that it really goes down to our ethos about what is growth, what is productivity. You know, should a human be just a productive unit and nothing else, or are we more than that? You know, and I think that I agree with what Georgia said. I think this idea that people need to feel that they're valued, you know, as a person, not just as a production unit or as an individual, but a person. And I think that means that if you give them a good place to work and you respect the boundary, you're giving them dignity. And I think with that dignity also comes that sense of wanting to be part of the whole, rather than being forced to be, you know, part of that production unit. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, if there's one thing, I just think that Singapore can afford to slow down a little bit. I know this is really anti rhetoric or narrative.
Slow work movement.
Yeah, you know,
slow food movement. Now we're going to slow work movement.
Exactly. So if there's infrastructure to slow down, you know, I think this might be something to think about. I know it's a bit abstract, but yes.
Well, you make a really great point. It's like you contribute to society with your work, so the company supports that. But if they also support you in contributing to raising your children well, being a good partner, that's also, you know, very valuable to society. So a company can contribute in many ways to that. So I think you make a really interesting point. Thanks.
Yeah, at this point, maybe we are close to the end and we can put up the poll question again, and we can just see if anyone is shifted their opinion from the first time around. Yeah, do we have the results from the
last time? I have them. It was 55 people said, all right, I'll do those cubicles, and 45 said as before, but with testing, if I wrote it down right. So slightly 50-50. Now, of course, we know that these cubicles work because George showed us his research results. We just changed my opinion because, you know, I'm a fervent hater of cubicles, but now I have to obviously revisit that.
Depends on what you are doing, right? Depends.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about how, you know, could you have cubicles, but also, you know, have physical meetings? Like you want to have the cake and eat it, like, you know, you need to choose between them too.
Yeah. Exactly. That's the point. I mean, depends on what you do. Like I'm pretty sure when you want to write a paper, you just want to be by yourself, right?
Yeah.
If you want to discuss the paper, yeah, you don't want a Zoom meeting.
True.
Yeah, I think one other thing I was just perhaps at the end here going to mention was I think perhaps also, and I wonder, something we haven't talked about is sustainability, right? And also I think perhaps that could be counted in the kind of, you know, this health that you mentioned, Georgios, like this is also the sort of sustainability of office spaces as well, and you know how that contributes along with kind of contributing to family as well, right? Like something like sustainability is also going to be important as we think about these
otherwise
problems.
we're all going to die. We might want to focus on it. Helen, the results are in for the poll.
Okay.
George's work has convinced people. There's now 63% say, okay, I'll take that cubicle. What you mentioned about status, I think, is a big deal too. I mean, nothing says you are low in status than a cubicle. I think they really have to do something about, you know, removing status from being at work somehow. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for this wonderful discussion. Helen, did you want to put in a last comment on this? No. Okay, then I'll close off. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful debate. It brings us to the end of our Think Out debate. So our thanks to you, Felicity Chan. You specialize in social relations in the context of urban environment. And thank you, Georgios. You're an expert in architectural psychology and design, which is a wonderful combination of disciplines, I must say. You should know that our huge collector's item, the NIST Think Out Debate Water Bottle, is coming your way. Thank you so much for your help. Audience, thank you so much for your participation and for joining us in this discussion. Please follow us on the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to learn more about this debate series, access research paper and information on both of today's speakers. And please join us next month for a debate on the social impact of genomic science. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye all.